In a time long past, and in a land forgotten by much of the world, there existed noble warriors known as samurai. They adhered to a strict code of honor both in and out of battle. However, there was one amongst them that was given reverence above all others. In his younger years, he was known as Ryuma. But as the seasons changed, tales of his exploits spread throughout this forgotten country. He had won countless bouts, mastered the mighty sword Shusui, and even slayed a dragon. The man went down in history with a simple yet overwhelming title. He lived as Ryuma, but he died as Tojin-sama, Sword God Ryuma. And as it had for 4 centuries, the people of the land continue to bow in respect to his name to this very day.
For the 5th time, you can't have it back. Plus, you have Enma now.
Yeah, I know, it's a great sword and all, it's just, I was so used to using Shusui, right? And I'm just saying, it was my sword.
It wasn't your sword, it was the sword of our national hero.
Yeah, I've heard that line a million times from that other lady.
Wait, do you think I'm a woman?
I'm just saying, look, he wasn't using it, I was, and you have a dragon you once slain. I'm just saying, we know that sword was definitely really good at slicing down dragons.
That one is as well. Enma was one of the only blades to harm Kaido.
Yeah, but harm and kill, in my line of work, those are 2 very different things.
We'll talk about this after the battle.
Alright. It was a pretty fleek sword, though.
Yeah, okay, I will admit that. It was pretty cool.
Oh yeah, ladies and gentlemen, today we're talking about a god. Not just any god, though. We're not talking about God Usopp, or God Eneru, or God Gonfall. We're talking about a sword god. Sword god, legendary swordsman, Shimosuke Ryuma. The power of a blade. The power of a warrior's soul. Okay, so I'm going to start this off with a question. It's a small question, but it's a big question. Mihawk or Ryuma? Who would win? Which one is stronger? Comment below. Of course, I'm talking about Ryuma when he was alive in his prime. I'm not talking about the Ryuma we meet during Thriller Bark. Obviously, at least we get to meet his body, his corpse. We get to meet Ryuma's corpse, okay? For being dead for 400 years, I gotta say, looking good. As good as you can be for being dead for 4 centuries, right? We find out later during Wano that Ryuma is actually buried, or was buried, in the Ringo region, which is the wintry region of Wano. That's where he was from. So I'm guessing that probably played a hand in why he's not just like bones like Brook is. He was buried there, and the cold preserved his flesh, so it like mummified him. He's like an ice or a snow mummy. Whenever we discover like a mummified corpse of like a Neanderthal or something out in the mountains or something. That's what happened to Ryuma. 23 years ago, Hogback, and maybe not even Hogback, but we know Moria was in Wano. He fought Kaido, and before he left, after his whole crew was decimated, I guess Moria's like, well, that dragon bastard wiped out my whole crew. I'm at least gonna steal the national hero and this fancy sword and then get out of Dodge. So, eventually Hogback came into play, patched up Ryuma as much as he could, probably made some adjustments to him, and reanimated him with Brook's shadow, okay? Now, a few things to keep in mind, though, when Zoro fought him on Thriller Bark, okay? And this was something that I was confused by for a little while, but from what we've gotten, some new information from the Wano arc, we understand the way that Zoro talks about it, that Ryuma was not really Ryuma. Like, he didn't have Ryuma's memories or anything like that. He was very much just the body of Ryuma, reanimated with Brook's shadow. Even the way that the zombie Ryuma talked about his blade. He didn't actually say it was his blade. He talked about it like, this is the blade of the legendary samurai. And even when Zoro defeated him, when he lit him on fire and he was about to, be cremated, and before he gave Shusui over to him, he was like, I'm sorry that I let this legendary samurai's body die, or I'm sorry I stained this samurai's lineage with defeat, or something along those lines there. So, yeah, not actually Ryuma. And going beyond that, Ryuma was able to use haki when he was alive. Ryuo, you know what they call it in Wano, obviously. He was the one that turned Shusui into a Kokuto, into a Black Blade. He did not use Ryuo when he fought against Zoro, so he could not use it. Also, because he was reanimated with Brook's shadow, he was limited to using Brook's techniques. Now, Brook is a great swordsman, but he's a very different kind of swordsman, okay? He's like more of a fencing kind of swordsman, and Ryuma obviously had a katana, and when Ryuma was alive, his techniques would be very different from Brook's fencing techniques, and even when Ryuma used them, you know, they were still really strong. His, like, thrust attacks were, like, really powerful and everything, but that's not the way that actual Ryuma would have fought with this blade. His real techniques when he was in his prime, and he still had a heart that was beating, you know, would have been way, way stronger. So, obviously, that downgrades Ryuma a little bit, which is unusual, because normally it's Zoro that gets all the handicaps whenever he fights against somebody. Did you ever notice that? Like, oh, I have this gut wound, but I'll fight you, you know, Kabaji, starved to death by, you know, Helmeppo when he fought against Morgan, you know, chained to various objects. You know, there's always some handicap that Oda has to give to Zoro. And even in that fight, he was out one of the swords. He was missing Yubashiri because that was destroyed by Shu, so he was fighting with just Sandai and Wado, but, you know, Ryuma was also given quite a few handicaps. Well, he doesn't have a beating heart, so that's a handicap, you know, a little bit of a handicap. He's forced to use a different kind of fighting style, with a different kind of personality, different kind of soul, and he can't use haki. So I think Ryuma kind of edged out Zoro there on the number of handicaps that were placed on him, right? So Zoro slices him down. I think the only time Zoro ever uses Kaien, the burning attack, you know, one sword style Kaien, an attack which I understand is just, he grips his sword like this, and he just swings it so fast, the friction just ignites anything he cuts, you know? Also, when I first saw the fight, I don't know if I'm the only one that thought this, but, you know, when you die, your body emits methane, which is flammable. Now, granted, Ryuma had been dead for 400 years, but the way I envisioned it, the reason he got lit on fire the way he did was like, oh, because he's a corpse and the methane ignited, that's what happened. But probably not. It's like anime logic. Hey, do you want to argue the fact that Zoro can light anything on fire with a sword swing? Because I'm not arguing that fact. Zoro can light anything he wants on fire with a sword swing, right? Okay. He can light the ocean on fire if he tried hard enough, probably. Okay. So, we're not talking about that Ryuma. We're talking about this Ryuma. This Ryuma is the Ryuma from one of Oda's original works, Monsters. He wrote it in 1994. It was part of like a collection series called Wanted. It included Wanted, the actual title that was also in there. Also, one of the Romance Dawns. There were two versions of Romance Dawn, but this was like the main version. I think this was the version that got animated for the 20th anniversary a little while ago. The one where Garp is actually the leader of a pirate crew, and he inspires Luffy to become a pirate and all that stuff. That's the Ryuma we're talking about. In that short collection of Wanted, you see monsters, and we get to see the kind of man Ryuma was. The best way for me to really describe this, and I just reread it. I read it a long time ago, but I reread it for the purposes of this video. The best way I can describe Ryuma here, though, is imagine Zoro and Luffy fused together. Because he's very much like Zoro, where he's a very honorable swordsman. He's very respectful. You know, when someone gives him food or money to live another day, he bows to them like, thank you so much for helping me in my time of need. He also has that swordsman's like spirit, I guess. Warrior's soul is what they call it in the translation I read. But he's very dedicated to his craft. Like, he's a swordsman through and through, to the point where he feels like a sword is the swordsman. They are one and the same. So in the manga, it happens a few times whenever one of the scabbards like meet. Like, if he's sitting at a diner eating and another swordsman, Cyrano, walks by him and like his scabbard taps Ryuma's scabbard, he immediately gets up in the middle of the restaurant and he's like, wait just a second! You can't be touching swords and not expect to get into a fight! Let's go! You know, so he has that kind of attitude there, where he's very, very adamant with that kind of logic. Like, no. You, the swordsman is the sword, so our swords just, like, mildly just clacked on the way out of the restaurant. Even if it was an accident, that's tantamount to being like, that's like being in a bar and, you know, a place that I don't go very often, but that's like being in a bar and you go get some drinks and you're walking back to your table and someone just like bumps into you deliberately. It's like, oh, and just like shoulder checks you. That's like, all right, you want to go? You know, that's kind of how Ryuma is, but he also, like, you know, picks his nose and stuff, so you get the kind of, like, Luffy vibes from him a little bit. He loves to eat and all that stuff, and he's very hot-headed at certain points in the Monsters one-shot, okay? I'm not going to explain the entire plot of Monsters. It's a one-shot, but it's, like, a long chapter, and that's not what we're here to do. Basic abridged notes of it, okay? So, Ryuma's in this town. There's also a famous swordsman called Cyrano or Shirano there. There's also a woman named Flare. We get some backstory with her. A big thing in the chapter are that dragons are real and they will torch your town down. So, you know, be careful whenever a dragon is about. There's a thing called the dragon horn that was stolen. The dragon horn, whoever holds it, is able to control dragons. A dragon gets summoned to the town. The famous swordsman, Cyrano, turns out to be an asshole that, like, robs places. He's also a swordsman. He's, like, a good swordsman, but he's also just like, oh, I'm gonna, you know, use the threat of this dragon to get the entire town to evacuate, and then want to rob them blind, and then get the hell out of Dodge. Ryuma finds out about this, cuts down Cyrano, and then a giant dragon emerges, and then Ryuma slices the dragon with one attack, decapitates the damn thing, and basically is just like, okay, well, you know, I did my job here. I did it not because I wanted a reward or because I wanted fame, but, you know, a true warrior does these things because that's the right thing to do, because it's the warrior's soul. And that's basically the chapter right there, and Ryuma just kind of walks away, you know, with his blade and his belongings, kind of like just a drifter, and he's just like, all right then, well, I guess I'm gonna get going. Man, I'm hungry. And then that's where it ends. Now, Oda went to explain further in an extra, like, addition here what exactly was going through his mind when he created this one-shot. And keep in mind, this was 1994. I think Oda was, like 17 when he wrote this, 17, 18, around there. He was pretty young, okay? So he did not know yet he was going to create One Piece. He did not know yet that there was going to be this huge thing that he was going to create that was going to change the world of manga, right? So he literally just said, yeah, the whole reason I drew Monsters was because I had this image of in my head of a dragon getting sliced in half in like a double page spread, and I basically just started with that image and then wrote a manga chapter around it. So it's like, you imagine like Oda, like teenage Oda, hanging out one day and just like, man, I want to draw a dragon getting beheaded. Alright, let's just throw in a samurai and, a noble knight. That'll be cool. We'll throw in, like, a knight in there that he also fights, and, like, this old west kind of town. Yeah, that works. Yeah, dragon horn, whatever, dragon. Yeah, we just have to get a dragon in there somewhere. Alright, cool, here you go. Like, I can imagine he drew this panel first, and then just back-built everything else around it. So, that was pretty cool. I mean, it was just a thing that he did, right? By the way, did you know Oda worked as an assistant for the mangaka of Rurouni Kenshin at one point? Yeah, interesting, right? That's pretty cool. I've never been a huge Rurouni Kenshin fan. That's one of the things that was on, like, Toonami when I was growing up that I never got way into, but I should definitely check it out. But yeah, he was an assistant for the mangaka for that. Interesting fun facts we're learning today. Something else that he mentioned about the name Monsters was he literally just had the, it's like, man, I want a manga chapter named after, like, you know, grifters or drifters, something with ters at the end of it. Like, just that word just spoke to Oda at the time, so he's just like, Monsters! And he fights a dragon. There you go. Okay, so that's Ryuma. Now, later on, when Ryuma appears, like, decades later in One Piece, maybe not decades later, well, kind of, because Thriller Bark happened in, like, 2006, 2007-ish, I think, around there. And yeah, so that would have been probably about 15-ish years since Monsters, around there anyway. I might not be getting the dates exactly right, but Ryuma appears there, and fans of Oda from way back in the old days asked him in an SBS, hey Oda, you know, is this the same Ryuma from Monsters? And Oda responded with, yes, it is the same character. There was also a question about Garp in there too, from the Romance Dawn, you know, one-shot, and he's like, well, Garp is, you have to understand, he's a pirate in the Romance Dawn one-shot. In One Piece, he's a Marine through and through. So that basically implied to me that's like, yeah, this is the Ryuma that I drew from that chapter. Like, that is canon, but I'm gonna change a couple of things around. The sword Shusui is a perfect example of that because Ryuma did not have this distinctive sword with this scabbard with the cherry blossoms that kind of look like the peace sign and like a kokuto. Ryuma did not have this during Monsters. He had this sword, which was much more standard, much more just basic kind of blade. Now, you could always say that Ryuma had this sword to begin with, and then he ended up getting this one later on, but considering in the story of One Piece, Ryuma slaying the dragon, that happened. Like, they confirmed that in the Wano arc. Like, Ryuma was a man 400 years ago that sliced a damn dragon in half and saved the island, okay? So that happened. And I like to imagine when he sliced that damn dragon in half, it was with Shusui, okay? So I'm sure that, like, the whole spirit of Ryuma and what he embodied in the one-shot, like, the warrior soul that he had, and his personality and the way he interacted with Sarano and Flare and everybody there, that's going to stay the same. If we ever get a flashback with Ryuma when he was alive, that'll pretty much be the same. But Oda might change a few other things around, like the exact circumstances with how he sliced down the dragon. He'll make sure to give him Shusui. Something else to keep in mind is in Monsters, the town they were in was not Wano also. It was like more like designed after an old western kind of town. Ryuma dressed like a Wano samurai, but he was the only one that dressed that way. Shirano dressed more of like an English knight. I think that's what Oda was going for here. And there were other citizens of the town that they just dressed in like typical outfits that you would see. Like Flare just wears an apron. Like nobody's walking around wearing kimonos or like Japanese garb or anything like that. There were no geishas walking around or anything like that. So Oda might change some stuff like that around where it's like the circumstances where he still sliced down the dragon, but it was in Wano instead of in this town, and he had Shusui instead of this sword. Maybe Oda might, if we ever do get a flashback to Ryuma, considering we just got done with a 10-chapter plus flashback involving Odin, probably not going to get something like that, but I would love to see. Here's a way you could do this. This is a way that you could do this that would work fine. Wait until after the battle is over, after the fight with Kaido and everything that is said and done. And then after the fight's done and everybody's healed up, Zoro goes to the grave of Ryuma near the end of Wano. And then we have a little bit of a mini flashback involving Ryuma. Kind of like to close us out of Wano, to maybe fill in a few more gaps. Maybe Hiyori, maybe Tenguyama Hitetsu sits down next to Zoro at the grave of Ryuma and tells the story of the sword god. Maybe something like that. Like, Kaido's already defeated, Orochi's already gone. Here's something a little extra. Here's a little bonus, something that didn't really come up during the main battle. Like, because Ryuma really has nothing to do with, like, Orochi, because he lived, like, hundreds of years before this. His title is Shimosuke Ryuma. We talked about this before. You could either say that he was a member of the Shimosuke clan, just like Ushimaru was, or Yasuie was, or you could say that Shimosuke was his title, Frost Moon. He was born in November, which is the month of the Frost Moon. You could say that that was the title he was given when he was alive, and because he was so revered and because he became the sword god, the Shimosuke clan descended directly from him. Ushimaru, Zoro, and Ryuma all look kind of similar when we look at it from that regard. So either he was just an ordinary member of the Shimosuke family, or he was the progenitor of the Shimosuke family or the clan, whatever you want to say. From what we understand, the daimyo families of Wano have been around ever since the very beginning, like with the Void Century, long before even Ryuma was born. We know the Kozuki clan existed back then. We know the Amasuki clan existed all the way back then. So the Shimosuke clan probably also maybe existed back during that day. Up until this point in the story, we have also not been given Ryuma's name written in any kanji. It's always been written in katakana. It's possible that the Ryu in Ryuma's name might be the kanji for dragon. When we see him during Thriller Bark with his corpse, the garb that he's wearing, we don't know if that's something that like Ryuma was given by Hogback or Moria, or if that was like what he was buried in. It looks rather ragged. That has the kanji for dragon on it as well. So it's possible that the Ryu is Ryu as in dragon. It also might be the kanji used in Ryuo, flowing Sakura, because he was a master of Ryuo. We don't know that yet. I'm figuring that whenever we see Ryuma's grave, we'll see how his name is actually written in the kanji there. But up until now, it's just katakana we have to go with now. And Shimosuke is, of course, written with the kanji for frost and moon. Okay, just like Ushimaru and Yasuie's names are, okay? Something else interesting that's very funny in the Monsters one shot is that Ryuma's a traveling swordsman, basically. He's essentially a Ronin. And he's traveling the land trying to find someone, a worthy opponent to fight. You can kind of see parallels to Mihawk and Zoro here. Zoro wants to, fight the greatest swordsman in the world. Ryuma has heard tell of a man called King that has the true warrior's soul, and he's like the strongest swordsman in the world. So Ryuma is traveling the land trying to find this king and challenge him to a fight. What he doesn't know, though, is that this king is actually him. Ryuma's been traveling from town to town and saving them from various problems and just continuing on his way because he's not interested in fame and glory or anything like that. He's just interested in, living up to his warrior's code and his creed. So he goes into a town, let's say some thugs are attacking it, he'll cut them down and save the townspeople and just move on. Giant dragon attacks another town, he slices it in half, leaves the dragon for, well, there's some food for you, and then just leaves. So the people of these towns just started calling Ryu, they didn't even know his name, so they started calling him King, and so the rumors are spreading, and Ryuma thinks it's somebody else, but it's actually him. So he's kind of like chasing his own tail, so to speak, right? So yeah, that's something interesting that I liked about him there, okay. So, Shusui, this was something, and I said this in the intro, I said it as sort of a joke, but when you start to think about it, like, okay, Shusui is a blade that's a Kokuto that Zoro had been using for 2 years now. He got it from Ryuma's corpse at Thriller Bark. It's a national treasure of the land of Wano that was grave robbed. So they want it back, and it makes sense why Zoro returned it and all that stuff, and he traded it out for Enma. But when you actually start to think about it, like, wait a second here. This sword has been confirmed to slice a dragon in half and, kill it. And who are we going up against right now in this arc? Kaido, who, last time I checked, has the ability to transform into a dragon. And it's like, yeah, Enma is a blade that was able to wound Kaido. But it's like, okay now, it's like, this sword has the prestige of the Dragon Slayer. This one is just, well, it wounded a dragon. It was like, if you're gonna pick which one to go into combat, I would go with the one that has the battle record, you know what I mean? So I could see Zoro being like, hey guy, we know for a fact this thing kills dragons because it's done that before. Ryuma's not really using it right now, so I could give it back, but maybe wait until after the battle's over. But no, Zoro's gonna hold off, because Zoro also, he felt a little bit, maybe not guilty, but he was like kind of cheated in a sense, because he's like, well, I fought against his body, but I didn't really fight against him. All right, and I didn't fight him at his best, certainly not at his best, and that's even shown after the battle was over, after Ryuma tosses Shusui to Zoro and he grabs it. He kind of says to him, he's like, all right, I'll take your sword, but this fight never happened. I wish I could have fought you in your time, samurai of Wano Kuni. So Zoro's like, you're this incredibly famous swordsman. It's kind of cheap that I defeated you in this way, so let's not put this on the record, okay? Ryuma is still this great swordsman that won countless battles, slayed a dragon. Hey, do you think maybe at that situation Zoro even kind of realized, like, trading blows with even, like, a corpse Ryuma with Brook's shadow? Do you think Zoro realized that, wow, if this guy was alive right now and at full power, I would have no chance to beat him? And Zoro wouldn't have. At that point, he didn't even really know armament hockey, so it's like, there's no way. Maybe Zoro realized, like, man, I guess I could defeat you now when you're so weakened, but that just feels like a little bit of shame on me and you, because, it's like, I shouldn't be able to defeat you, but I did, right? So Zoro needed a sword, he needed a third sword, so he took the sword, but he's like, let's just say this never happened. And then Ryuma gets cremated, turns to dust, and the shadow returns to Brook, and everybody's happy. Okay. So let's talk about some other titles that Ryuma received. So on top of Shimosuke, which might have been his actual last name, or his, we don't know that. Legendary Samurai or Legendary Swordsman. that's something that's more standard, kind of cliches. Like, you're the legendary swordsman. I'm like, all right, he's not the only one to be given the title legendary swordsman. But another title that he was given was Tojin-sama, Sword God Ryuma. All right, listen to me, okay? That is not a title you just give someone, all right? Sword God. This is a shonen battle manga. When you see anybody show up with the title of Sword God, you turn and run in the opposite direction, alright? Because that guy is the strongest. I don't care, right? Like, Mihawk, really strong guy. I don't see Mihawk with the title of Sword God. I don't see Zoro with that title. Ryuma, and only Ryuma, had that title. Rayleigh did not have that title, alright? So, yeah, if there was, like, honestly, anybody in the world you're gonna say is, like, this is objectively the strongest swordsman that ever lived in the history of history, it's Ryuma. I would be okay with that. I would totally be alright with that. I mean, he's dead right now, so unless time travel gets involved... Well, okay, other kinds of time travel gets involved, you know, where we can go actually, like, travel back to the past and Zoro can fight Ryuma, unless we get that involved, which we probably won't, because Toki even said, like, traveling to the past is impossible, you know, so that's just, it's not gonna happen, you know, unless that's the situation there, then we're never going to see Zoro fight Ryuma in an actual full-on battle, but it wouldn't have mattered anyway, because Zoro wouldn't have been able to win, because he's the Sword God, alright? I would like to know a little bit more of the history behind that, like, a little bit of seeing Ryuma in One Piece, and the way that Oda, like, depicted him now, after, like, years and years after Wanted and Monsters has been written. I could see, honestly, Oda being really interested in that. Like, I'm imagining, like, because when Oda drew this battle between Ryuma and Zoro in Thriller Bark, it mirrors the final scene where he sliced the dragon in half in Monsters. So you can imagine, you know, Oda's sitting there drawing Ryuma, like, 15 years after the fact, like, wow, I can't believe I'm incorporating Ryuma into this famous manga that I'm writing now, you know, One Piece, like my magnum opus. This is pretty cool, right? He can go back and incorporate old characters and people still recognize the old characters from his previous works. So I think he would definitely be on board with drawing Ryuma again in that style. And he's dropped a few pieces of lore about him, like even the Sword God thing we only just found out about in Wano Kuni. We knew he was a strong samurai, but that epithet, that title he was given, Sword God, that was only revealed a couple dozen chapters ago. So Oda is building up the lore around Ryuma. I'm thinking we might have a little bit of a flashback involving Ryuma by the end of this arc to really kind of close out his story or anything, any loose ends that maybe Oda wanted to show with his character, okay? But he's long dead and gone. He actually died when he was relatively young. He was like 47 when he died, and he died of an illness. So maybe we'll find out more about exactly how that went down. You know, we might find out some more stuff about Shusui. Might find out about more of his exploits, about what he did. Maybe Oda might incorporate Shirano and Flare in Wano, but he might change their names, because Flare is not really a Wano name, you know, so maybe, like, okay, he'll draw Flare, but he'll give her a different name and a different outfit, but it still looks like her. Same thing with Shirano, like, he'll give, because Shirano, when I first saw him, looked sort of like Mihawk crossed with Shanks, which is awesome, because he's got like the kind of like the musketeer vibe, but he acts very similar to Shanks, but then he's like kind of chivalrous, but then later we find out that he's an asshole. He just robs the town blind with the help of, like, DR, who's like this criminal, right? So, you know, we find that out later. But yeah, he might reincorporate this character, like in Ryuma's backstory. We might see a character that looks like this with the mustache, but dresses in a way that would be typical of Wano. Because Wano is such an isolated nation, I don't think they'd have a town like this in the land, you know? So change some stuff like around like that. But yeah, man, it's sad because we'll probably never get to see it, but I would love to see Mihawk fighting Ryuma or Zoro fighting Ryuma. You know, considering that it's all said and done now, Ryuma is long dead, his corpse is disintegrated, there's no way he can come back. It's totally possible that Oda might write in a line of dialogue where Zoro, after hearing Ryuma's exploits or something, and just, or Oda might even come out himself and say in an SBS, like, Ryuma was the strongest swordsman in One Piece, period. He was stronger than Mihawk at his best. He was stronger than Zoro at his best. That was Ryuma, the sword god. Absolute, set in stone. Rayleigh was not even, comparable to him in his prime. Ryuma was the best. He could come out and say that because with everything that's said and done, it's like, okay, cool. I mean, and I'd be all right with that. All right. So anyway, thanks for watching the video, anybody. I would recommend to go check out Monsters or read any of Oda's earlier works in Wanted if you have not. Because even back then, it's interesting reading Oda's earlier works before when he was still a teenager. But the art style is still very similar to the way he draws One Piece. It's a little bit less refined back then, but it's still pretty much exactly the same. It's really good artwork. So yeah, go check it out. This will be Tekking101 signing out. All praise the Sword God.